The day Officer Dale Mercer walked into Judge Judy's courtroom, he walked in like a man who had never once in his life been told no. Pressed uniform, shiny badge, a jaw set tight like he was already bored with whatever was about to happen. He nodded at the bailiff, one cop acknowledging another, and pulled out the chair at the defendant's table with the kind of casual confidence that comes from years of people stepping aside for you. He didn't look at the boy. Marcus Webb, 13 years old, sat across the courtroom in a plastic chair that was slightly too big for him. He wore a light blue shirt that someone had clearly bought for him recently. The fold creases from the packaging were still visible on the sleeves. His jeans were clean, his sneakers were older, a little worn at the toe. His hands were folded in his lap, and he was staring straight ahead at nothing, the way kids stare when they're trying very hard not to cry in public. He had nobody sitting behind him in the gallery. No parent, no guardian, no relative, just a young social worker named Patricia Cole, maybe 28 years old, sitting 2 rows back, clutching a manila folder, watching Marcus with worried eyes. The courtroom filled slowly that morning. Regular audience members who had come expecting the usual: landlord disputes, car accidents, neighbor fights. They had no idea what they were about to watch. Production staff would later say that in 30 years of television, they had never seen a prep morning quite like this one. The crew had reviewed the case file the night before. Several of them had gone quiet. One of the camera operators came in that morning and told his colleague, "Whatever you do, don't miss the boy's face." Judge Judy Scheindlin had also reviewed the file the night before. She had been sitting in her office at 9:47 p.m. when she finished reading it. Her assistant knocked and asked if she needed anything before leaving. Judy looked up and said only, "Pull the police body cam footage again, all of it, from the beginning." She watched it twice. Marcus Webb had been homeless for 4 months by the time the incident happened. His mother, Diana Webb, had lost her job as a hospital cleaning staff worker when the clinic she worked at shut down its lower-level operations. They were behind on rent before that, the kind of behind that's really just 1 bad month becoming 2, becoming 6. When the eviction notice came, Marcus's mother fought it. She called legal aid. She wrote letters. She went to the housing office 3 times with a folder of her own, neatly organized, showing every payment she had ever made. It didn't matter. They lost the apartment on a Tuesday in November. By Thursday, Diana was in the emergency room with what turned out to be a stress-related cardiac episode. She survived, but she was hospitalized for 9 days and then transferred to a short-term care facility because she couldn't be discharged without someone to look after her. There was no one. Marcus went into the system. He didn't stay, though. Group homes for teenage boys are complicated places. Marcus lasted 3 weeks before he left. Not rebelliously, not violently, just quietly slipped out one morning before anyone was awake and started living on the streets near the East Side metro station. He was resourceful. He found spots to sleep that were dry. He learned which soup kitchens opened early. He kept himself cleaner than most people would expect. He even found a cracked phone someone had thrown away, got it working, and used the library Wi-Fi to text his mother in the care facility every few days. "I'm okay," he would write. "Don't worry about me." She worried constantly. Officer Dale Mercer had been on the force for 11 years. He had a commendation for bravery in 2019, a real one, earned during a difficult situation involving a warehouse fire and 2 people who needed to be carried out. He coached youth basketball on some weekends. His neighbors described him as stand-up. His captain had never had a serious complaint filed against him. But people are complicated, and sometimes the part of a person that shows up in a moment of frustration tells you something that the commendations don't. It was a Wednesday afternoon, 3:15 p.m. The temperature had dropped overnight and stayed down, and Marcus had been sitting outside the entrance to the East Side Metro for about 40 minutes, not blocking anyone, not asking for money, just sitting on a piece of cardboard near the wall with a paper cup of coffee that a woman had bought for him an hour earlier. He was reading a book, an actual book, a battered copy of Holes by Louis Sachar that he'd found in a donation box at the library. Officer Mercer came through on a routine patrol with his partner, Officer Janelle Brooks. Brooks would later testify that she told Mercer, "He's not doing anything. Let's keep walking." She said she thought they had agreed to do exactly that. They hadn't. Mercer approached Marcus and told him to move. Marcus said, "Yes, sir," and began gathering his things, the book, the cup, a small backpack. He wasn't slow about it. He wasn't arguing. But Mercer's patience, apparently, had already run out before he even reached the boy. What happened next was captured on Mercer's own body cam, on Brooks's body cam, and on the security camera mounted on the station wall facing the entrance. 3 separate angles, all of them showing the same thing. Mercer grabbed Marcus by the collar of his jacket, said something to him that the audio partially picked up. "I told you once." And then as Marcus stumbled slightly from being pulled, Mercer's right hand came up and struck the side of the boy's face. Not a shove, not a grab, a slap, open palm, audible impact, hard enough that Marcus dropped the book and fell sideways against the wall. Brooks said "Dale," and stepped forward, but Mercer had already stepped back, breathing hard, jaw tight. He told Marcus to leave the area. Marcus picked up his book without looking at the officer. He picked up his backpack. He walked away. He didn't run, he just walked. The footage showed him walking until he turned the corner, and then the camera lost him. Brooks filed an internal report that same afternoon. She said later that she had gone back and forth about it, that it wasn't an easy thing to do, report a colleague, but she kept seeing the way Marcus held that book. She kept seeing the way he walked away without looking back, not angry, just gone. She said, he walked like someone who was used to it, and that was the worst part. The Internal Affairs review was opened. The bodycam footage was pulled and reviewed. The department recommended a 2-week suspension without pay and a mandatory training course. No criminal charges, no termination. Patricia Cole, Marcus's assigned social worker, found out about the incident through a colleague who had heard about the Brooks report through the department network. She found Marcus 3 days later sleeping in the doorway of a closed laundromat on Vine Street. She sat down next to him on the pavement and asked if he was okay. He showed her the bruise on the side of his face, yellowing now, going from purple to the color of old mustard, the kind of bruise that says it was bad a few days ago. He hadn't reported it himself, hadn't told anyone. "Why not?" she asked. He shrugged. "Who's gonna listen? If that question hit you somewhere, who's gonna listen? Hit subscribe right now, because this channel tells the stories of people the system forgot, and they deserve to be heard." Patricia Cole drove him to a clinic. She photographed the bruise with her department-issued phone. She filed the medical documentation. She contacted a legal advocate. And then, after 6 weeks of paperwork, correspondence, and being told repeatedly that this matter is being handled internally, she got the call that changed everything. Judge Judy's producers had heard about the case. They wanted to hear from Marcus. The morning of the hearing, Patricia helped Marcus pick out the shirt. She took him to a Target the evening before and stood in the boys' section and let him choose. He picked light blue. She asked him why, and he said, "My mum likes blue." He said it simply, without drama, and Patricia had to look away for a second at the rack of shirts. In the car on the way to the courthouse the next morning, Marcus asked her one question: "Is she going to listen to me?" "The judge," Patricia said. "Yes, I really believe she is." He nodded and looked out the window. Judge Judy entered the courtroom at 10:08 a.m. The audience settled. The bailiff called order, and for the first 15 seconds, Judy said nothing. She simply looked at the 2 people sitting across from each other at the respective tables. She looked at Mercer in his pressed civilian clothes. He'd been told not to wear the uniform, and she looked at Marcus, who was sitting very still with his hands folded. Her expression was unreadable. She opened the case file, looked down at it briefly, then back up. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "you've been a police officer for 11 years. Yes, Your Honor. You have a commendation for bravery. Yes, Your Honor." She nodded slowly. Then she turned to Marcus. Her voice changed. Not softer, exactly, but slower. Deliberate. "Marcus, how old are you?" 13, ma'am. "Are you in school?" A pause. "Not right now. Do you want to be?" The question surprised him. You could see it. His chin lifted a fraction. "Yeah, I do." Judy wrote something on her notepad. The courtroom was very quiet. "Okay," she said, "let's talk about what happened on that Wednesday afternoon." Marcus told his story without notes. He spoke carefully, in a low voice, and he got through most of it without any visible emotion until he reached the part about picking up the book. "I just wanted to get my book," he said. "I had my thumb in the page I was on. I didn't want to lose my place." One of the camera operators later said he had to force himself not to zoom in right then. Judy let the silence sit for a moment after Marcus finished. She didn't rush. She didn't fill the space. She just let it be there, the weight of what he'd said, before she turned to Officer Mercer. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "your turn." Mercer had prepared for this. You could tell. He had his version organized, clean, almost rehearsed. He said Marcus had been warned previously about loitering. He said the area had been the subject of multiple complaints from commuters. He said he had used minimal physical contact to encourage compliance. He said Marcus had not been injured in any serious way. He said he regretted the situation had escalated, but stood by his actions as falling within the scope of his professional judgment. He said all of this in a steady, confident tone. When he finished, Judy looked at him for a moment. Minimal physical contact. She repeated, "Yes, Your Honor, let's watch the footage." The footage played on the monitor in the courtroom. All 3 angles, one after another. The room was silent. When it finished, Judy didn't speak immediately. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes moved from the screen to Mercer's face. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "that boy was picking up his backpack." Mercer said nothing. "He was picking up his backpack and his book. He said, 'Yes, sir,' when you told him to move. He was moving." Judy's voice was still controlled, but there was an edge underneath it now, something pressing against the surface. "What exactly had he done that required you to put your hand on him?" "He was." "I'm not finished." Judy held up one finger. The courtroom went very still. "I've been looking at this footage since last night. I've watched it 4 times. I cannot find a single moment where that boy was threatening you, resisting you, arguing with you, or doing anything other than getting up to leave when you told him to." She paused. "Can you show me the moment? Point it out to me, because I'm not seeing it." Mercer's confidence, which had been holding steadily until now, shifted. Not collapsed, shifted. Like a man who suddenly realizes the ground under him is different from what he thought it was. "It was a judgment call in the field," he said. "You're watching it on a screen." "I am watching it on a screen," Judy agreed. "And what I'm seeing is a grown man in a police uniform striking a child." She let that land. Then she looked down at her file again. "Let me ask you something else, Mr. Mercer. In 11 years on the force, how many times have you physically struck a civilian who was complying with your instructions?" The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. Outside the courtroom, in a small green-walled waiting room down the hall, Patricia Cole sat with her phone turned face down on her knee. She had been excused during the footage review, a procedural thing, but one of the production assistants came out every 10 minutes to give her a quiet update. "He's holding up," the assistant whispered after the footage had played. Patricia nodded. She had her hand pressed to her sternum like she was trying to keep something from falling out of her chest. Back inside, Judge Judy was still looking at Dale Mercer. The question about 11 years had gone unanswered. Mercer's lawyer had started to interject, but Judy raised her hand without looking at him, and he stopped mid-syllable. That hand raise was one of those gestures that only work when the person doing it has absolute authority in the room, and in that courtroom she did. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I want to be fair to you, so let me say this clearly. I have read your record. I know about the commendation. I know you coach basketball. I know your captain considers you a solid officer." She paused. "And none of that is irrelevant. It means this incident is not the whole story of who you are." Mercer blinked. He hadn't been expecting that. "But here is what I need you to understand." Judy leaned forward, both elbows on the bench. "None of that history, none of it, changes what happened on that Wednesday. A record of doing good things does not give anyone a credit account they can spend on a child." Her voice was quiet, but every word landed with precision. "You don't get to subtract from this moment, because you did something brave in 2019. That's not how it works." She sat back. "And the thing that bothers me most," she said, "is not even the slap. The slap is visible. The slap is on camera. The slap has consequences. What bothers me is what you said in your testimony just now. You said Marcus had not been injured in any serious way." Judy picked up a document from the folder, the medical report Patricia had filed. The clinic noted contusion consistent with blunt impact. The bruise photographed 4 days later was still, and I'm quoting, "significant in size and coloration. That is what not seriously injured looks like to you?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "He was 13 years old," Judy said. "He was reading a book. He was sitting on cardboard because he has nowhere to sleep. And he said, 'Yes, sir.'" She set the document down. "You want to tell me what threat he posed to you or the public?" The question sat there, unanswered, in the middle of the courtroom. Judy then did something that nobody in the room expected. She looked at Marcus. "Marcus, I have one more question for you, and I want you to be honest. You don't have to say anything that makes anyone look good or bad. Just tell me the truth." She waited until the boy met her eyes. "When he hit you, what did you do?" Marcus looked at her for a moment. "I picked up my book," he said, and somehow in that small room, with cameras rolling and an audience full of strangers and a police officer sitting 5 feet away, those 4 words broke something open, not dramatically, not with gasps and tears, though there were tears in the room. It broke quietly, the way a window cracks from pressure before it shatters. You hear it before you see it, and then suddenly you understand how fragile the whole thing was. A woman in the 3rd row pressed her hand over her mouth. The bailiff looked at the floor for a moment. Judy said nothing for a long few seconds. She wrote something in her notepad. Her hand was steady, but she wrote slowly. Then she looked up at Officer Mercer one last time. "You had a scared child in front of you," she said, "and instead of seeing a child, you saw an inconvenience." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "That's the thing that I cannot excuse. Not with commendations, not with good intentions, not with 11 years. You looked at a 13-year-old boy who had already lost his home, his mother, his school and his safety, and you took something more from him." She paused. "You took his belief that adults with authority might protect him." The room was completely silent. Mercer was staring at the table in front of him. His hands were clasped, knuckles pale. "I hope that lands," Judy said softly. "I really do." The ruling came methodically, the way Judy always delivered judgments, with the evidence laid out cleanly, each point connected to the next like links in a chain. She awarded damages for the medical treatment and Patricia's documented costs. She added emotional distress damages and framed them not as punitive in the way a fine is punitive, but as recognition, her word, recognition that what Marcus had experienced was real, documented harm that deserved to be formally acknowledged. She ordered that the judgment be placed in a trust account, protected and managed by the court-appointed advocate until Marcus turned 18. "This money is yours," she said to Marcus directly. "It's not for rent or emergencies or other people's problems. It's yours when you're an adult. It's a start." He nodded. His throat moved. She wasn't finished. "I am also making a formal referral today." Judy held up a second document. "The department's decision to suspend Officer Mercer for 2 weeks without pay and require a training course is, in my view, insufficient given the documentation. I am referring this case to the Civilian Oversight Board and recommending a formal conduct review that goes beyond what was done internally." She looked directly at Mercer. "I cannot make personnel decisions for your department, but I can make sure the right people are looking at this, and they will be." Mercer's lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something. Mercer didn't respond, but the moment that the internet would replay, the one that would end up in articles and reaction videos and long comment threads where strangers argued and cried and talked about their own lives, wasn't the ruling. It happened after the gavel came down. Judy stood up from the bench. The bailiff moved forward, expecting the usual exit, but Judy walked around the side of the bench, came down the 2 steps, and crossed the courtroom floor toward Marcus. She was not a warm person by reputation. She was sharp, funny, impatient with nonsense, and deeply fair. She was not known for public displays of emotion. She stopped in front of Marcus, who looked up at her, this small woman with sharp eyes who had just spoken his name out loud in a room full of people and made it mean something. "Stand up a second," she said. He stood. She looked at him, really looked, the way people rarely take time to look at kids who are in the system, kids who have learned to make themselves small and quiet and non-troublesome. She looked at him like he was worth looking at. "You did well today," she said. "You told the truth. You were polite. You were brave." She paused. "Don't let what happened to you become the story you tell yourself about what you deserve. You deserve more than that." Marcus nodded. His jaw was tight in the way of someone holding very still. "Okay," Judy said. She gave a single nod, turned and walked back to the bench. The audience applauded. Not wildly, not the kind of applause that's performing itself, just people pressing their hands together because they didn't know what else to do with the feeling. Marcus sat back down. He put his hands in his lap. He looked at the table. Patricia Cole, who had been allowed back in for the ruling, was watching him from her seat 2 rows back. She would write in her case notes that evening that Marcus did not cry during the verdict or during Judge Judy's words to him. He cried once, quietly, in the car on the way home. She said he turned his face toward the window, and she gave him the privacy of pretending not to notice. He cried for about 4 minutes. Then he sat up straight, wiped his face, and asked if they could stop somewhere and get food because he was hungry. She bought him a burger and fries and a milkshake, and they sat in the car and ate. And he told her about the book he was reading, about the boys in the story who had to dig holes every day and how eventually you find out why, and she listened to all of it. In the weeks that followed, the episode aired. The clip of Judy walking down from the bench and standing in front of Marcus spread the way only certain moments spread, not because people shared it to make a point, but because people felt something watching it that they wanted to give to someone else. Comment sections on the clip were unusual for the internet. Most comments were 1 or 2 sentences. Quiet, personal, I grew up in the system, this made me cry. My brother was homeless at 15, nobody ever did this. He picked up his book, I can't stop thinking about that. One woman wrote, I showed this to my police officer husband. We didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, I need to think about some things. I think that's the most honest thing he's ever said. Mercer's conduct review was opened within 10 days of the referral. His attorney argued publicly that Judge Judy had exceeded her role and that her comments amounted to prejudicing an administrative process. Legal commentators were divided on the procedural question but largely agreed on the underlying one. The bodycam footage spoke for itself. Mercer was placed on desk duty pending the review's conclusion. He did not make any public statements. Officer Janelle Brooks gave a voluntary interview to the Oversight Board. She corroborated everything. She said that when she had tried to speak up in the moment, she had been ignored and that she had thought about it every day since. She said she filed the report because she knew a kid named Marcus would never be able to make anyone listen on his own. She said that's not what the badge is supposed to mean. 6 months after the hearing, Patricia Cole received a call from a school enrollment coordinator at a public school in the district that had a transitional housing partnership. Marcus had been placed in a supported housing program, not a group home, but a smaller transitional unit for teenagers, run by a non-profit that had reached out after seeing the episode. He was enrolled in the 8th grade. His first week of school, he carried a new copy of Holes in his backpack. His previous copy had finally given up on its binding, and his teacher reported in her first progress note that he was quiet, attentive, and that when asked during an icebreaker activity to name something he was good at, he said, staying calm. His teacher wrote in the margin of her note, this one's going to be okay. Marcus's mother, Diana, was discharged from the care facility 4 months after the hearing. Her cardiac health had stabilized, and a combination of a housing voucher and assistance from a non-profit got her into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the west side. Marcus moved in on a Friday evening. He brought his backpack, the housing program's bedding kit, and a bag of clothes. Diana had made rice and chicken, the way she used to make it before everything came apart. She told him to sit down and eat. He sat. He ate. He told her about school. She listened with her chin in her hand, and her eyes full of something that was not quite crying and not quite smiling, but somewhere in between. After dinner, he did his homework at the kitchen table, while she watched something on TV in the other room. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like something rather than nothing. Outside on the street, the city kept moving, loud, indifferent, full of people carrying their own complicated stories. But in that kitchen, a kid did his homework, and his mother was in the next room. It was by most measures a small thing. Marcus knew better. The trust account that Judge Judy had ordered remained protected, growing slowly, waiting for the day Marcus turned 18. One afternoon, a few weeks after moving in with his mother, he asked Patricia what he should do with it when he turned 18. She said it was his decision entirely. That was the point. He thought for a moment. College, he said. I think I want to study law. Patricia didn't say anything for a second. Why law? She asked. He looked out the window, the same direction he always looked when he was thinking about something he didn't have the full words for yet. Because I want to be in the room, he said. I want to be the one who knows what the rules are. So when someone says there's nothing we can do, I want to know if that's actually true. Judge Judy Scheindlin, in a rare moment in an interview some months later, was asked by a journalist whether there was one case that had stayed with her recently. She didn't name it. She didn't have to. There are cases where the law does what it's supposed to do, she said, and then there are cases where you remember why you became a judge in the first place. She paused. Those are different things, and sometimes, not often, but sometimes, they're the same case. She moved on to the next question, but anyone who had watched the episode knew exactly what she meant. Somewhere across town, a boy was doing his homework at a kitchen table. His book was in his backpack. His mother was in the next room. And somewhere in that same city, on a busy street corner, near a metro station, A new security camera had been installed. City maintenance, routine upgrade, no ceremony, no announcement, just a lens, pointing outward, watching. If this story meant something to you, if Marcus's 4 words stayed with you, share this video right now. Not for views, share it because somewhere out there is a kid asking the same question he asked. Who's gonna listen? Let them find this. Subscribe for more stories like this, and leave one comment below. What do you want to say to Marcus? I read every single one.